Ivy Monroe adjusted the worn strap of her Caddy bag as she stepped onto the emerald green of the prestigious country club's golf course. The morning sun glinted off the manicured fairways and the polished clubs carried by sharply dressed players. Ivy's simple polo and khaki pants marked her as an outsider among the sea of designer outfits and expensive gear. She kept her gaze low, heart steady, determined to focus on her job without drawing attention. She spotted her assigned player, a young amateur named Ryan, setting up his shot near the 10th hole. Ivy approached quietly, offering a small smile as she handed over the correct wedge. The soft murmur of the elite crowd and the distant clink of glasses from the course's exclusive clubhouse created a backdrop Ivy was not used to but moved through with polite efficiency. Just as Ryan lined up his shot, a commotion erupted near the scorer's tent. Ivy's attention snapped to a loud voice accusing her of cheating. "I saw the scorecard, and it's impossible," barked a familiar face from the wealthy amateur players' circle, a tall man with a sneer who clearly thought Ivy could never belong here. "That caddy must have tampered with the numbers. It's blatant dishonesty." Whispers and chuckles rippled through the crowd. Some patrons exchanged glances filled with judgment, others openly sneered. Ivy's cheeks burned with embarrassment as more voices chimed in, their words dripping with disdain. "Typical," someone muttered. "Trying to steal a win without the skill." The tournament officials quickly intervened. Without a second look at Ivy's protests, they removed her from the grounds, telling her firmly she was banned from future tournaments. Her pleas fell on deaf ears. Holding back tears, Ivy walked away, her steps heavy, her head bowed, but inside, she fiercely knew she was innocent. Ivy Monroe closed the door to her small apartment behind her, the familiar click sounding unusually loud in the quiet space. The worn linoleum floor felt cold under her bare feet as she dropped her caddy bag near the entrance. The weight of the day's accusations settled on her shoulders, making her feel heavier than she had in weeks. The news that she was effectively barred from the tournament, the one place she had almost begun to feel a part of something bigger, hit her with a force she hadn't expected. She walked to the kitchen, opening the fridge to find it nearly empty. The leftovers she'd been avoiding felt tasteless now. She pushed the remnants aside and sat down at the table, her fingers tracing the chipped edge. Sleep had been elusive the past few nights, and tonight was no different. Her mind, usually so focused when carrying those heavy golf bags, raced with replays of the tournament and the sudden charges of cheating. She remembered how the jeers and whispers had burnt like fire, how she'd felt the piercing eyes fix on her as if expecting a confession she could never give. Ivy swallowed hard and glanced at the cracked window pane, beyond which the city's lights twinkled indifferently. The life outside seemed distant, unattainable. Her phone buzzed softly, her employer at the golf club sending a terse message. "Reports of cheating are damaging. Your position is on the line. Meet tomorrow." Ivy's chest tightened as the words sank in. The job she'd fought so hard for was slipping through her fingers. She had nowhere to turn. As she turned off the screen, her mind drifted back to the past, not the distant, forgotten past, but the years that defined her struggle and the sacrifices made. Ivy's thoughts went to her childhood town, a small community where golf courses were more dreams than realities and where she first fell in love with the game her father introduced her to. She had been a brilliant student, excelling in school and on the local teens' golf circuit, her future seemingly bright. But then came the news that changed everything, her mother's diagnosis. The illness was slow but unrelenting, and Ivy was forced to put her own ambitions on hold. College scholarships faded away as she took on multiple jobs, caring for her mother and keeping the household afloat. The quiet strength that propelled her through those dark days was never about spotlight or recognition. It was a deep honesty and resilience born from love and necessity. Her memories warmed briefly, the moments her mother smiled despite the pain, the late nights spent practicing putting in the dim light of their small living room, and the dreams Ivy whispered to the night sky, hoping they might carry her somewhere better. But those dreams had morphed into something more modest over time. With her mother gone and her options limited, Ivy took up caddying at local courses. It wasn't the life she imagined as a teenager, but it provided her with purpose and a connection to the sport she loved. Every bag she carried was a step toward reclaiming a piece of herself. Yet, no one at the country club had known any of this. They saw only the quiet, humble girl with the simple clothes and the calloused hands. Out of place and, evidently, an easy target when something went wrong. Their disbelief in her innocence, layered with judgment about her background, had shattered not just her reputation but the fragile sense of hope she had cultivated. Ivy hugged her knees to her chest as she sat on the threadbare sofa. The room was small, its walls bare save for a faded photo of her mother holding a golf trophy, a bittersweet reminder of what had been lost, and what remained. She felt the sharp sting of tears but refused to let them fall. This was not the end. She had to find a way to keep going, she had no choice. Tomorrow she would have to face more questions, more doubt. But inside, a quiet determination started to take shape, not from bitterness, but from a steady knowledge that truth and patience might still prevail, even in a world so quick to judge and condemn. The night deepened, and Ivy sat there, bruised but not broken, the shadows of her past intertwining with her present struggles. Though the path was uncertain and steep, the love for the game and the memory of her mother gave her the strength to move forward, even if the journey seemed impossible to others. Days later, Ivy lay awake in her apartment, the faint hum of city life filtering through the thin walls. Her mind was restless, chewing over every moment of the tournament day that had unraveled her world. Then suddenly, a detail flickered in her memory, a comment she thought she'd dismissed at the time. The tournament announcer had casually mentioned a drone flying above, capturing the event with live footage for broadcast and review. At the time, Ivy hadn't given it a second thought, focused on her work and the growing tension around the scorecard. But now, it surfaced as a potential lifeline. With a mix of hesitation and hope, Ivy picked up her phone and dialed the tournament office. The receptionist's polite voice answered, but when Ivy asked about viewing the drone footage to clear her name, the tone shifted abruptly. "I'm sorry, Ms. Monroe, but the footage is considered proprietary, and we don't release it to individuals, especially when the official decision has already been made," the voice explained. Ivy's grip tightened on the phone. "I understand, but I need to prove my innocence. Someone else was responsible for the scorecard tampering." There was a pause. "I'm afraid there's nothing I can do." The call ended. Frustration bubbled inside her, but Ivy refused to give up. She needed another way. The next day, Ivy returned to the country club, not on the course this time, but near the security office. During the tournament, she had exchanged a brief greeting with Marcus, a security guard who seemed more approachable than others. She found him by the surveillance monitors and explained her situation quietly, careful not to draw attention. Marcus listened, brows furrowed. "Let me see what I can do," he said, pointing toward the computer screens. Together, they reviewed hours of footage. The overhead drone views showed the entire hole from tee to green, capturing players, caddies, and officials moving around. Ivy's heart pounded as they scrolled through the moment the disputed scorecard was presented. There, an instant of movement that didn't fit the official timeline. The camera caught a rival caddy, someone Ivy had noticed during the tournament, tall, confident, always hovering near the elite groups, but with a quick glint of mischief in his eyes. At one point, while Ivy and Ryan were distracted by a rules discussion near the 11th hole, the rival caddy slipped near their scorer's table. His hand hovered briefly over the pinned scorecard, and in a fast, practiced motion, he adjusted the numbers with a pen. Ivy's breath caught. The footage clearly showed the tampering, and the timing made the accusation against her all but impossible. Marcus shook his head. This changes everything. You were set up. But how do I get this scene? Ivy asked, her voice a mixture of hope and fear. Marcus shrugged. You'll need to find the right audience. People in charge, or the crowd itself. Ivy nodded. For the first time in days, a spark of confidence brightened within her. She had the proof. It was time to take the next step. The day of the next tournament event dawned bright and clear, the crisp air carrying a hint of anticipation through the country club grounds. Ivy arrived early, clutching a small USB drive tightly in her palm, the weight of the evidence she carried almost as heavy as the bag she used to shoulder on the course. The crowd was beginning to gather, players, caddies, officials, and the usual elite patrons dressed in their impeccable attire. Ivy's simple clothing made her feel conspicuous once again, but this time she wasn't invisible. She felt eyes flicker toward her, some filled with skepticism, others with curiosity. Maybe even a glimmer of respect. She navigated toward the tournament official's tent, where familiar faces greeted her with guarded expressions. The tension was thick. News traveled fast in these circles, and the whispers about the drone footage had begun to circulate, though many still doubted her claims. Ivy took a deep breath and stepped forward, catching the attention of the head official, a man named Ronald, whose sharp suit and polished demeanor spoke of decades spent managing high-profile events. Mr. Ronald, Ivy said with measured politeness, I have the drone footage you refused to release. It proves that I was not responsible for the tampering with the scorecard. The real culprit is the rival caddy who accused me. She handed over the USB drive. Ronald's eyes narrowed as he took the device. We'll review it, but I can't promise anything. Accusations like these are serious. Ivy's gaze did not waver. I just want the truth to come out. Word spread swiftly. Within moments, a small crowd gathered nearby, drawn by the murmurs and the buzz of impending drama. Ivy stood quietly as Ronald connected the device to a nearby screen, clicking on the footage. The drone view appeared, hovering high above the grounds, capturing the smooth flow of the tournament. Then the moment came into view, the rival caddy, standing casually near the scorer's table, glancing around to make sure no one was watching. In the blink of an eye, he reached down and discreetly altered the pin's scorecard while Ivy and her player remained engaged in conversation a dozen yards away. The crowd's murmur grew louder as they watched the undeniable proof unfold before their eyes. Gasps and whispers spread quickly. Ivy glanced sidelong at the accused rival caddy, who stood frozen, his confident facade slipping. He offered a nervous smile, attempting to deflect the attention, but his eyes betrayed panic. Several onlookers, who had earlier shared doubtful and disdainful looks toward Ivy, now turned toward the video screen with widened eyes. A woman in expensive golfing attire nodded slowly, whispering to her companion, so she was telling the truth all along. The rival caddy's player, a young man with a scowl, pushed forward, trying to counter the narrative. This doesn't prove anything. Video can be edited, he insisted, but his words rang hollow to those who had witnessed the clear sequence. Ronald raised a hand to calm the growing unrest. The footage is an official recording captured by tournament-sanctioned equipment. We cannot disregard it. The balance of opinion shifted palpably, and Ivy, standing tall despite the storm of emotion inside, saw the crowd's whispers transform into conversations of support. One of the tournament's senior players, a respected figure named Margaret, approached Ivy after the crowd began to disperse. I'm sorry this happened to you, Ivy. You didn't deserve it. It takes guts to stand up for yourself, especially when others doubt you. Her genuine words touched Ivy deeply. The revelatory moment disrupted more than just the social atmosphere. it sent shockwaves through the tournament's hierarchy. The accused rival Caddy, previously self-assured and dismissive, now found himself cornered by the undeniable evidence. His attempts at denial faltered under the crowd's shifting glare. Ivy had expected fear, rejection, humiliation. Instead, this moment of unveiling ignited a profound reversal. People who had scorned her begrudged their assumptions and began to see her as someone brave enough to face injustice head-on. Standing among the very elite who had once cast her aside, Ivy felt a surge of quiet satisfaction. The truth was no longer a distant hope, it was clear and visible to all. This was the victory she had fought for, not just for herself, but for the integrity of the sport she loved. As the afternoon sun began its slow descent, Ivy knew the path ahead was uncertain, but no longer would it be clouded by false accusations. The tide had turned, and with it, her place in this world was awakening. The news of the drone footage's revelation spread like wildfire throughout the country club, creating a storm impossible to ignore. Tournament officials convened quickly, their usual confident demeanor replaced by a mixture of embarrassment and urgency. Ivy watched from a distance as the rival Caddy, now visibly shaken and pale, was summoned for a formal discussion. The once arrogant competitor now faced the consequences of his actions: disqualification from the event and a ban from participating in future tournaments under that club's jurisdiction. The decision sent a clear message: there was no tolerance for deceit, regardless of status. The rival Caddy's reputation unraveled rapidly. Rumors of his indiscretion moved swiftly through the elite circles, trading whispers in lounges and whispered disparagements over luxurious dinners. Friends turned their backs, sponsors reconsidered ties, and invitations to exclusive events disappeared overnight. The fall from grace was swift and public, a stark contrast to his earlier confidence and disdain. Meanwhile, Ivy was formally exonerated. The tournament committee issued a public statement acknowledging her innocence and apologizing for the premature judgment. Her name, tarnished unjustly mere days before, was restored. The club's manager personally approached her, extending an apology laced with a mixture of respect and regret. "Ivy, we owe you more than words," he said sincerely. "Your professionalism and grace under pressure have been exemplary." A hush fell over the gathered crowd during a brief ceremony arranged on the tournament grounds. Ivy stood quietly as the apology was read aloud, the words washing over her, a combination of relief and overwhelming validation. This moment was more than just public peace, it was an affirmation of her integrity and the resilience she had nurtured through hardship. But the surprises weren't over. Margaret, the respected professional golfer who had supported Ivy during the confrontation, stepped forward with an unexpected offer. "Ivy," she said, her tone warm and certain, "would be honored to have you as my personal caddy for the upcoming regional tour. Your dedication and honesty make you exactly the partner I need." A ripple of murmurs ran through onlookers, many nodding their approval. Ivy's heart skipped, not from disbelief, but from an unexpected surge of pride. This offer was a rare endorsement, a stepping stone into the very world she had once merely observed from the sidelines. Ivy took a moment before responding, her voice steady yet humble. "Thank you, Margaret. I would be honored to accept." The crowd's faces held smiles and approving nods. For Ivy, this was no simple job offer. It was the recognition of her hard work, resilience, and character in a world that often overlooked those who don't come from wealth or status. As the event wound down, Ivy found herself surrounded by many she hadn't expected to see as allies. Her former accusers, now softened, approached with tentative apologies or renewed respect, while others simply nodded quietly, acknowledging her new place among them. Despite the formal apologies and new opportunities, Ivy chose to keep her humility. When the applause faded and the spotlights dimmed, she walked away from the clubhouse alone for a moment. The soft glow of the setting sun bathed the course in golden light, shadows stretching long across the grass. With her head held high and a calm smile, Ivy felt something shift within herself. She was no longer the quiet, simple Caddy invisible to the elite crowd. She was someone who had stood firm in the face of falsehood, reclaimed her name, and earned her place with honor. The journey ahead was still uncertain, full of challenges and new beginnings, but the quiet woman who had once been dismissed now carried the unmistakable aura of respect. And as she stepped down the path beside the green, the applause and judgment of the past had finally faded, replaced by the steady rhythm of her own footsteps moving forward.